From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Former Vice President Mike Pence visited the Wall Street Journal this week to talk about the state of the country and especially why he's running for president, make the case for his candidacy. How good a case did he make, and what are his chances in the increasingly crowded Republican presidential field? Welcome. I'm Paul Gigot with the Wall Street Journal Opinion Pages, and I'm here with my colleagues Kim Strassel and Bill McGurn. Welcome to you both. You were participants in the Mike Pence meeting. We usually get presidential candidates coming through to visit us, candidates from both parties in primary season. It's always one of the most interesting times to cover politics because you have intra-party differences that are exposed. Both sides haven't formed at the barricades yet. And you get these splits and interesting insights into personality. Mike Pence is the first one to visit us this cycle. And he's going to run, as he said, as a conservative with civility, a conservative who's not mad about it, as he likes to put it. Let's listen to an excerpt from what he told the Journal's Jerry Baker on his podcast after he came to see us. The answers are similar. Let's listen.
I think the American people long for our politics to restore a threshold of civility that's been absent long before our administration. It seems to me that once you get 15 miles out of Washington, D.C., the people in this country actually get along pretty well because the American people are unfailingly respectful of one another. We're a live and let live country. We have our values, we have our ideals, but we're respectful of our neighbors, treat others the way we want to be treated.
Well, Kim, hasn't been a whole lot of civility in our politics for quite some time, notwithstanding Joe Biden's promise to unite the country when he was running for president in 2020, trying to contrast himself with 4 years of President Trump. Mike Pence, in our meeting with him, did cite President Biden's campaign promise on civility and said that that was popular. It had some resonance, but that Biden has quickly repudiated that, abandoned it, and has been partisan himself and uncivil with lines like Jim Crow 2 as the Republican agenda, and so on. What do you make of Mike Pence's idea that there's a lane here in the Republican primaries for a candidate who's conservative but not mad about it?
Yeah, I was struck by how much he talked about this. And in addition to mentioning Biden, he talked a lot about Calvin Coolidge. And now I don't know if it's been 100 years since we've had civility in our politics. I hope it hasn't been that long. But he talked a lot about reading biographies of Calvin Coolidge and Calvin Coolidge's own autobiography. And obviously that was a president who was known for his civility, his common sense, his sense of service. And Pence said that he felt the country was at the same moment now, that there was this quiet hunger to return to civility. That was a phrase he actually used. I think there's something to that. People look at Donald Trump and say he's a bomb thrower, and that was one of the main reasons he got elected. But I would argue that people elected him because he was willing to take bold action, and more that they were willing to overlook the fact that he's a pretty uncivil person. Mike Pence's bet here is that people are tired of the drama, the circus, that this is something that did play into Biden's election. And I actually think that's true. And that they want a candidate who has a little bit more optimism, isn't running around angry and shouting about everything, more Reagan-esque, as it were, with a sense of humor and an optimism for the United States. It'll certainly be interesting. He's going to get a test for that because that's not necessarily the approach of most of his opponents in this campaign. And the question will be, can he land some jabs? Can he make the case against his opponents and do so with that civility he's talking about?
Yeah, he has to draw some contrasts, and he started to with the other candidates, and particularly with President Trump, who's the front runner by a long shot in the race so far in the Republican primary race. And some of those will be on temperament, but some of those will be on policy, Bill. Let's listen to Pence talk about Ukraine.
The war that's raging in Eastern Europe today is the result of an unprovoked invasion by Russia into Ukraine, an attempt to redraw international lines by force. And I think it's absolutely in the interest of the United States of America to continue to marshal resources as the leader of the free world and to rally our allies to give the Ukrainian military the means to defend themselves, repel the Russian invasion, and restore their sovereignty.
Bill, forthright answer there. He put with us support for Ukraine solidly as an example of the Reagan doctrine, which was that if freedom fighters around the world wanted to fight for their freedom against invasion or tyrannical regimes, we would supply them with the means to do so. And of course, it's Ukrainians themselves who are fighting and dying in Ukraine. And he says our support for them is critical. He also said, I think importantly, that if Russia prevailed in Ukraine, that would have a greater threat to Europe and we'd have to be drawn in more than we are now. And of course, he also said it's an important lesson for our staying power in Ukraine, is an important lesson for Xi Jinping in China. And if we don't stand with Ukraine, then Xi will draw the appropriate lessons for our willingness to do so with Taiwan.
I think he's absolutely right. And it shows you can be civil and still make tough points. What's interesting about Pence's comments is that, so far as I can see, they're unique in the Republican Party among the declared candidates. I haven't heard anyone make as forceful a defense for the intervention in Ukraine as Pence had. And I think all those things that he cited, the effect on Taiwan, the effect on Europe and so forth, they're well within the conservative tradition of foreign policy. The irony is he seems to be the only one who makes them.
Donald Trump certainly isn't. He's saying, I'm going to end the war in 24 hours.
Even the others can't be able to say Ukraine should win this fight. So I think he can be very effective. And in a debate stage, people are looking for the fight between DeSantis and Trump, assuming Trump joins the debates, or Christie and Trump for fireworks. But I think if Pence politely stands his ground, it will serve him well. It'll probably enrage Donald Trump. That said, I think were the long odds to be beat and Pence to get the nomination, I think it would enrage Trump more than DeSantis. And I see Pence suffering from Trump's attempts to delegitimate him in the eyes of Republican voters. I think it's a real tragedy.
It's interesting to listen to Pence at length as we did. We had about an hour and a half with him, so we got to hear him dilate on quite a number of issues and also analyze the state of the party. Kim, one of the things that we asked him was just how much the party had changed in the Trump years, given some of the positions that have emerged. And he said in interesting fashion to me, his formulation was that, well, the party really hasn't changed all that much. It's still fundamentally a conservative party of the kind that Ronald Reagan represented. And he put it that they've added some things. You know, there's a tougher line now on China that Trump added. There's a tougher line on trade. But that fundamentally it's still that three-legged stool of traditional moral values, a strong foreign policy, national defense, and free market economy. That's something of a dissent from the perception from a lot of people who think that the Republican Party is no longer that party, and there's no longer a market for that in the GOP.
I was so happy to hear him say that. And I hope that he's right on that. He actually had a line I liked. He said it would be a mistake to follow the siren song of populism unmoored from principle. And we have seen many of the candidates following that in little ways here or there, some of them attempting to recraft themselves as what they call national conservatives. Even the candidates who don't outright call themselves that have certainly played for that audience. And that is why you see folks tiptoeing around the issue of Ukraine, leaving open the possibility of more isolationism. It's why you see people doubling down on trade, suggesting we shouldn't have any of it, calling, for an end to the possibility of any more immigration. And Pence's way of casting this was very different. He said that he didn't think the movement has changed that much. As you said, he said that they were now add-ons to this. He called border security rather national security. security. That does signal his intention to be in the lane of wanting to focus on stopping the floods that are coming through. He said trade should be fair, free and fair. This at least leaves open the possibility that he might pursue some sort of trade, although we don't know where that lands. And then he obviously mentioned China. We'll see how this goes. This is a much more Reagan-esque view of the world. And by the way, we're not that far from that period of time. Yes, Trump was a bit of a departure, but we're talking about 6 years. And what's notable to me is that Trump, on the other hand, is doubling down on those issues and leading as a result a number of his candidates. And that really could leave a space for Pence to define himself in this race. And, that goes as well to something else that he talked about when he visited, when we asked, how do you make the case now that you're striking out on your own? Why are you running against the man who you served alongside? And Pence's answer was very solid. He said, Trump promised in 2016 to govern as a conservative, and he makes no such promise today. And he mentioned the foreign policy issues. He talked about Trump's stance on abortion. And he also said entitlements. Now, I thought that was a little misleading because Trump, even in 2016, was a candidate who claimed he wasn't going to do anything about Social Security or Medicare. But Pence is clearly going to go out there and say, I am the guy that is going to return the party to a full embrace of all of the values and principles it's long stood for.